Yep, definitely. Definitely it is. And what, if you look at somebody who's considering this, what would you say the biggest mistake a developer or a budding developer would make when they look at this MLI Select program? And welcome back to the Money, the Mindset, and the Mentoring podcast. You know, a lot of people are looking at developing multifamily around the world, Canada, the US, and all over the places. And one thing they happen to look at is say, well, how do I get this started? The planning phase, the development phase. How do I put together parcels of land? So if you're somebody who's looking on the market and saying, man, I'm tired of these old buildings that are out there that are, dilapidated, that when I look at my CapEx, the CapEx is more than I'm even spending on buying the property. So it's just a really challenging thing. So in those situations, if you're looking at that and going, I'm tired of that, I just want to get some land, knock a building down, build something to my specification that's eco-friendly, it's making me money the day that I open up the doors, Ali Nazarian is your friend, and he's going to help you figure that out today. So Ali, thanks so much for joining the show, buddy.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. I'm excited to be here to talk about how to build wealth through developing multifamily.
Boom. I love it. I love it. So I'm gonna hit you with this right away. So if you build a property in the right way, your tenants pay the hydro, your tenants pay the gas, tenants are paying the water. Why do I care that this building is environmentally friendly?
Great question. Great question. So I think the short answer is there's a lot of government incentives right now for building energy efficient buildings that are more eco-friendly, sustainable, less GHG emission. So you might have heard of, I'll jump right in, MLI Select program. Government came up with that a couple of years ago that basically gives you much better finance. You can go up to 50-year amortization and, really better rates and lower debt coverage ratio if you can meet, among other things, sustainability metrics such as energy efficiency and GHG emission reduction. So that's the short answer. But also the energy efficient homes are more convenient, more comfortable for tenants. So that will reduce tenant turnover. That all we know, it costs a lot every time you have a tenant turnover. So those are the two main reasons. And obviously you make money while you're saving the planet as well.
Well, saving the planet is great. Saving the bank account's greater, because most people say, I love it, but, that comes in. So the idea is, if we summarize, we're looking at saying, the big reasons why you should consider building a sustainable multifamily as a new construction process is because, number one, you're going to get access to better capital because it's going to be sit on that balanced scorecard, really strong and heavily weighted. So that's super exciting. The second thing is you're going to reduce your tenant turnover because, let's face it, if the windows are breezy and the tenant has to pay some $300 a month bill on top of your rent, their affordability is going to go down because it's really the total cost of ownership for that tenant. So the lower the cost of ownership for them, the more they can afford to pay you in your property. So that's another thing. And then the
100%.
last thing obviously being is that, you're helping the planet and can't go wrong with that.
And along the way, and like you mentioned, it has to make financial sense first. And then it's a bonus, obviously, tenant comforts and, saving the planet as well.
And I know that there's a lot of changes that happen with the governments in and out and sideways, up and down. But the thing is, today, looking at the beginning of 2025, other than the MLI Select program, are there other government incentives in the building process that people could take advantage of as well?
Yeah, that depends on the province and the municipality where you are. Surprisingly, Ontario doesn't have a lot of incentives beyond what the federal government offers. But we did a retrofit, like a deep energy retrofit, renovation on a building in New Brunswick. And there are programs where you can get 50% of your capital cost to implement those energy efficiency upgrades from the local government, from the provincial government. So those incentives exist in certain municipalities, and, provincial as well. Unfortunately, Ontario, it's a lot of talk, but not really a lot of action when it comes down to it.
Action's where it's at, and if they're not taking the action, it's going to definitely do something to, make people look into other places. I know there's a lot of development that's happening in Alberta, and definitely New Brunswick. That is the hotbed. The amount of people I hear about who want to go out there and build multifamily, we hear about things like what you're talking about is amazing. if we look at the retrofit, and I know we're talking about new construction, this just came into my mind, is so if somebody, say, for example, had a retrofit process where they're going to go in new windows, new, glazing, whatever on the windows, and they're going to put in maybe a little bit more insulation, upgrade the HVAC. If in that process, they also, I know a lot of the old buildings, the HVAC was centralized, but by then dividing it out so that it could be metered into the individual, could you do that as part of the process?
Yeah, 100%. It's a little bit more involving. It's a more deep retrofit, as we call it. If you want to separate water, for example, like you have to modify your plumbing. But for heating system, the good thing is now this basically the heat pumps, like mini split heat pumps, you can replace or you can supplement your existing heating system with the heat pumps. And basically your existing heating system, where it might be like an old gas furnace or something, it becomes a secondary backup to the heat pump. So your main source of heat becomes the heat pump, and that can drastically reduce the energy consumption and the GHG emissions. And that can qualify you for the energy points at MLI Select.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that right there is, and you could do that on a retrofit to then get it into MLI Select program.
100%. Yeah. And the real trick is the older the existing HVAC system, the easier it is to achieve those points, because the points are based on improvement. You need to improve it by 40%. So if your starting point is really low, just the heat pump will probably get you like 30% of the way. The building we worked on in New Brunswick, it had a like 70-year-old oil furnace, and that was really bad. So putting heat pumps right off the bat gave us like about 30% energy efficiency improvement, and we got rid of the oil furnace altogether.
I remember we did one project where we took out the furnace and replaced it with the boiler and replaced it with a high efficiency, 4 high efficiency boilers to replace it. And it was originally started off as a wood burning boiler.
Wow.
That was converted to an oil burning boiler that was converted to a gas burning boiler. And then we're like, why don't we just stop the madness and put some new stuff
in? Exactly.
And it was but it was interesting to see, because seeing something that had that kind of a legacy that still was running was kind of cool, but
it belongs in the museum.
It definitely belonged in the museum. Yeah. I think that was
Electrification.
correct me, I think that was in Ted Rogers' house is where that was. Yeah, it was pretty cool, but I don't remember. My memory's foggy.
No, electrification is really the way that the world is going towards, because we can control, the amount of emissions. Like if you're in Ontario, it's 99% clean grid. It's all from renewable sources. So if you electrify the building, which seems to be the trend, that will basically get you a lot of points when it comes to MLI Select.
So that's interesting. They're really pushing. So if you put a high efficiency natural gas boiler in, that's going to sit lower than something that's an electrified heat pump.
I believe so, yeah. It needs to be modeled. It's case by case. But the points that you get from the MLI Select program or for MLI Select, there are 2 components to it under the sustainability category. There is energy efficiency improvement, which is obvious, but there's also GHG emissions reduction, greenhouse gas emissions. So when you burn gas, you might get points from your energy efficiency improvement, like if you put a high efficiency gas boiler, but you may not get all the points from GHG emission reductions. But when you electrify it and use like electric powered heat pumps, because the grid is clean, you get the points for GHG emission reduction as well. And energy advisors will model that.
I would think that, just my engineer head, and again, I'm not an engineer, but I have a little bit of a thought process around this, is that, for example, Trafalgar and the 401 in Canada's got this huge natural gas power plant that its scrubbers are probably not the most efficient, and it's probably producing an enormous amount of off-gassing coming out of that, compared to somebody's furnace in the basement that's running at condensing levels that really it's just water going out, and mostly gets condensed anyways. So it's really just kind of like hot air coming out. So when you're running at 99% efficiency, I think that boiler in the house will produce less gas when you take it on a neighborhood than that one power plant in Trafalgar.
So I actually used to work, I'm an engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, and I used to work as a plant engineer in a gas-powered power plant.
I got the right guy. Perfect.
I know. In total, actually in Niagara. The gas-powered power plants in Ontario, first of all, they're being phased out. The government is not renewing their contracts. A lot of them were like 20-year-old contracts that are coming to an end. Usually they have 25-year to 30-year contracts, but also they're only there as backup. So they don't run all the time. Depends. I don't think we have, as far as I know, we don't have gas-powered power plants that run 24/7 in Ontario. They're usually backup to the system because especially in the summer, 2, 3 p.m. when all the ACs are on and the electricity demand goes out the roof, the nuclear plants and the solar power plants, you can't ramp them up that quickly. Gas power plants have that ability that they can be ramped up real quick. So yeah, they're not as clean as the rest of the grid, but that's why we say it's like 99% on a normal day if they're not running all the gas power plants. Also, like if the nuclear plants go down or if you have a cloudy day for a bunch of days or no wind, we need to have a backup for that. So the gas power plants, as far as I know, are there for that reason.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I always look at energy efficiency as the down market as to, I bought an electric car. And then when I watched that one Joe Rogan episode of, where the stuff that makes the batteries is made.
Yeah.
And I, I don't have that car anymore because I got it rear-ended on the 401, but I felt bad afterwards. I'm like, oh my God, like these people are suffering in these mines and we're producing such toxic stuff to go into these cars. Is it the right decision?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of controversy about like how those lithium batteries are produced and, the human rights in those mines in Africa or wherever they're produced. Yeah, there's always two sides to the coin. That's for sure.
Yeah. But in this side, let's just talk about the economics of it. You get a big thumbs up when it comes to the MLI Select. And I want to talk a little bit about the MLI Select program because I think it's one of those things that it's this magic mystery that only the wealthy get. And what people don't realize is how accessible the program actually is for anybody, whether it's on a retrofit, whether it's on a purchase or on a build, like what you're doing. It's actually readily available to most Canadians who are looking at getting into the space.
100%. Yeah. As long as you have 5 or more units in your application, the golden tip here, maybe for the listeners, is like they don't need to be under one title. You can buy 5 condo units in a large condo tower and put an MLI Select on it if it qualifies, or you can get a CMHC program. It just has to be 5 in the portfolio. You can often like get 2 triplexes side by side and put it under one blanket CMHC application. So that's accessible. But yeah, to your point, it's something that it's accessible for a lot of people. It actually makes it a lot more accessible for more people because the entry point now is lower. Like you don't need to put 20% down. If your building qualifies, you can be as low as 5%. And a lot of that in Alberta, in New Brunswick, you can achieve that. Certain markets in Ontario, you can achieve 95%. On a recent refinance on 9 unit in Oshawa, we achieved 94%, which is not as straightforward. And, you need to be creative with adding more value, like creating additional income. Like, we had a bunch of things that maybe if you have time, I can give some tips on that. But it's a beautiful program. The only downside is there's a lot of paperwork. Nobody gives you free money or cheap money easy. So there's a lot of paperwork involved, and you got to make sure you work with people that they know what they're doing.
Yeah, I think de-risking the deal is the most important thing, I think, for them, because again, it's backed by CMHC.
Exactly.
Looking at them, that's really a quasi-government organization. That's our tax dollars going into there. So you want to make sure that our tax dollars are being well spent, where they're being invested in projects like this.
100%.
And so all that paperwork, I think, is definitely required to make sure the money's going to the right spot. And when we look at the pillars for the MLI Select, I mean, we've got the pillars of sustainability, you've got the pillars of accessibility, then you got the pillars of affordability.
Yes.
And as the different pillars. And I think the one that I think pays off in the biggest dividends really is in the sustainability side. Yes. Because I think it helps win for the tenant who's going to take over that space. It's going to be comfortable and affordable for them because it's a lower cost of operating with that building. And obviously for the landlord, it means that they don't have to take a rent cut and change the dynamic of their tenancy. And so they can still retain a higher caliber tenant into their A class property.
It basically attracts better tenants, right? When you have like an energy efficient building means has a higher build quality. You can't achieve the energy efficiency without having a good quality build. And that naturally attracts better tenants, less headaches for the landlords. But you're absolutely correct. That's the one that most people try to use. Unfortunately, CMHC changed the rules recently, so you can't get to the 100 points and the 50-year amortization with just energy efficiency. You would have to have affordability and sustainability if you want to get to the 100 points. But even with just energy efficiency, you can achieve 40-year amortization, 40 years, which is really good. Like it really helps with the cash flow, and it's still a big incentive for sure.
Yep, definitely. Definitely it is. And what, if you look at somebody who's considering this, what would you say the biggest mistake a developer or a budding developer would make when they look at this MLI Select program?
I would say probably not calculating how they're going to meet the requirements in terms of, in their design. It can't be an afterthought. It's something that you need to think about it right off the bat. When you're creating your pro forma, when you're like putting your budget together, when you're running your numbers, how your financing work, you have to decide, are you building with CMHC program, like using the CMHC program, MLI Select, or you're going to build with conventional financing and then refinance it with, or take it out, as we call it, with CMHC. So these are all strategies that you need to think about ahead of time during the planning stage as a developer. That's basically your most important role, is to create a solid plan. So if they don't think about it right off the, like in the beginning, it becomes difficult to adjust to meet those requirements halfway through construction.
Yeah. Yeah. Financing a project that's halfway through construction is, where they lose their funding or something happens with liquidity. And then that's usually where they have to take a big breath of fresh air, because it's going to hurt at this moment. It's always
100%.
good to do the work up front and have really good cash flow planning.
Exactly.
And I know for us, we give every one of our clients who is looking to build a nice little spreadsheet so that they know, how long are those reserves really going to last? And the capital that never moves as fast as you think it's going to. And so how are you going to hit those little gaps to be able to make sure you're
100%. Yeah. And also, like when you change your design halfway through the construction, it's going to cost you, moving a few lines on a drawing is almost free. But moving a wall or adding something when you're in the middle of the construction, it's not going to be cheap.
Yeah, looking for, Revit's got a really good program that allows you to look for where things are going to collide. And when we first started, the idea of, I had an HVAC business for, my gosh, what is about 10 years. We did large 55,000 square foot homes. Like these were big houses.
Yeah.
And you've done all your plans where your ductwork's all going to go. And then you walk into the room and there's a plumbing line going right through there. And the plumber, you already asked him, because this has happened before, where are you running your plumbing? Oh, we're going to go over here. But then the trade that showed up was not the trade that specified. And therefore they are you kidding me? And that's now a change. And that's another bulkhead that nobody likes, and they get frustrated with it.
Yeah, 100%. Clash checking. Yeah, there are softwares that can do that. Funny enough, like I used to work actually out of all industries in the oil and gas industry. And when they design the plans, they use the 3D and they can do clash check for all the, like all the piping and all the equipment that's there. So I guess that's coming to residential space as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a friend who does a lot of processed steel. And when you go into those factories, everything's got to be calculated, because, you're looking, number one, fluid dynamics. Every elbow is a really important elbow to think about. 100%. And if it's long radius versus short radius, that's a big difference. And so you've got to really think about it when you start putting that into your thing. I know with ductwork, we had to think about it. We're not just going to do a quick little change 90 and hope that the airflow is going to be the same.
100%.
Yeah. Now, when you look at the last bit of actually managing the project, and somebody said, okay, it's great, I've got an idea, I'm going through all the planning phases, and, generally I say hire a professional to help you with that. That just makes so much more sense. And then you get to the next phase, which is you've now funded, you've gone through your funding strategy. So now you know exactly how the money's going to flow. and then you actually get into the build. How hard is managing the build?
So we try to work with construction managers or general contractors who have the experience to do the work. So as a developer, the way I describe it is the developer is like the conductor of the orchestra. The developer doesn't play any instruments. You know, your builders, your mortgage brokers, your architects, engineers, they're all the musicians sitting there in the band. Then they're experts at playing their own instrument. The conductor just needs to know if they're playing the instrument correctly and if they're playing it at the right time to the right tune. So as the developer, your job is to basically conduct the orchestra of all these professionals. When it comes to the construction stage, there's a lot of coordination. There's a lot of back and forth. Architects and engineers, they try to design things with the most amount of detail as they can. But we all know when things get to like actual construction, there are always things that come up that maybe was not thought about or didn't show up in the designs. So there's developer's role, or as the development manager's role is to coordinate all that and put out the fires that are bound to come up, right? It will happen. And also monitoring the cost, the schedule, staying on top of the contractors to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, making sure money is flowing in and everybody's getting paid on time, so that you don't end up in somebody putting a lien on your property because you forgot to pay them, or you didn't plan to your point, plan your cash flow properly. So the developer's role is to make sure everything goes smoothly. The developer doesn't need to necessarily be the builder. Generally, especially when it comes to larger projects, developers hire builders. There are developers that are what we call vertically integrated. So they have an in-house construction team. Makes it obviously a little bit easier for them to manage the communication and whatnot. But I would say your role as a developer is managing all the communications, making sure everybody have what they need to get the project done, and then staying on top of change orders, basic cost schedule impacts and things like that, and always looking at what the potential challenges are going to be in the next 30 to 60 days and try to be proactive with that.
Now, you mentioned about vertically integrated. How many developers do you think are heading in that direction of being vertically integrated?
That's a very good question. So right now, especially since COVID, when costs started going up, and more developers are moving towards being vertically integrated. And this is interesting. Like even when I worked in oil and gas, you would see that in like large oil and gas companies too. When the oil price was down, they would hire engineers in-house and they would do all the design in-house. They would try to do construction in-house because everybody wanted to save money. When the oil price was up, they didn't care how much it cost. The speed was the top priority. So it's kind of the same thing now in the real estate industry. Because the costs are high, interest was pretty high for quite a while. Labor costs are still high. Land costs are high. So everybody's trying to minimize their cost and increase their profit margin, or actually like the margin where, things can happen during construction, right? There's never a project that goes 100% as scheduled and on budget. There's always some variances. Yeah, surprising fact, right?
I cannot believe that would ever happen.
So everybody's trying to create a bigger margin and a cushion when it comes to development because there are a lot of moving parts, right? So more and more developers, I see they are moving towards being vertically integrated, or you see those that are vertically integrated doing more projects because they can control their cost better.
What happens with, I think a lot of the
change.
vertically integrated, their number one challenge is not having enough projects because, they're going to have their own plumbing team, their own electric team, they're going to have their own HVAC, and each of those different divisions of that company, they need another job to go to.
100%.
And so they run a different style of pain point than the person who's not vertically integrated, because the person who's not vertical is like, is my contractor going to show up on time? Are they still going to be here a month from now? Is it going to be the same service that I'm going to get? Do they have the same vision in this project? Whereas somebody who's vertically integrated, their vision is going to be all in alignment. I think
Yeah.
there's a company in our neighborhood. It's called Drulo Holdings,
Okay.
and they do a lot of vertically integrated projects. And you can see like they just punch these buildings out,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even all their project management, like their afterwards, property management is all vertically integrated as well. So you've really got a good connected group, and it's really interesting to see when their buildings pop up and how they're such a well-oiled machine. And I think there's benefits to both.
Percent.
Yeah, just
Like to
depending on
your
what you're looking
point,
at.
that the big challenge for them is that now that's a beast that has to be fed. You gotta have projects keep coming, and you have to be able to fund all those projects to make sure you can keep and maintain your team. Otherwise, you're gonna lose them, and it's gonna be very difficult to get them back. So
Yeah,
there are
you're gonna
pros
you're
and
gonna have a jack
cons.
of all trades kind of team, which they're gonna be
Yeah.
doing things that's not their core competency. Or you're right, they're gonna be going off to another job because you just don't have anything for them.
Exactly. If you're not a big developer that does, like constantly have projects, it may not make sense to be vertically integrated because now you have a lot of carrying costs and overhead because now people are on salary. If you have project or you don't have project, you still have to pay them. It's like a vacant building that, you're still paying the mortgage and the tax and all that, but there's no income coming from it. So now you have to feed that machine. So having that balance, and that's a strategic decision. It's really a business decision to try to be vertically integrated. I don't think it's something that happens overnight. Most developers, they kind of like built that. I see a lot of builders becoming developers where they already had a crew, but now they're adding the layer of like bringing the development side in house and doing the design and the financing and you know, the developer role versus developers becoming vertically integrated, because building a construction team, you might know better, like it's not that easy. It's a
It never
very
is. It never
specialized
is.
work.
You have a lot of people who really want to express autonomy, and what they don't realize is they actually could see better benefit in that vertical integration. And you really need really good leadership to be able to create that vision that attracts those people away from autonomy. And
Exactly.
I mean, that guy who's running that, flooring business doesn't want to be you
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
the only person that they work for, unless
Exactly.
they can see a strong vision that they identify with.
Exactly. I've seen developers buying those contractors that they work with. There's one developer I know that they had a contractor. Look, they worked with a couple of different contractors, and then after a few projects, they basically put a bid on all of them and see which one they can buy. And they ended up buying, I think, 60% of one of the general contractors. So they're not necessarily like bringing them all in-house, but they become subsidiaries of the developer.
Yeah, they own
And
the
they can
company, therefore they get first right of job,
Exactly. And
on
it
the
also
docket
helps
list.
them with their tax management, tax planning and things like that. And there's some of the profits that the construction company is making. Now it's theirs technically, but also the construction company can keep operating independently almost to do projects for other people to fill those gaps. So that's another model that can be used.
Now, if you look at people right now listening going, well, this sounds truly interesting. In a half hour, you certainly can't cover all the details.
For sure.
But if they wanted to reach out to you, they could go to your website, and your website is ecolux
Yes.
and that's ecolux and then find you there, because I think a lot of times when people look at the project, they just don't know how to get started. They get the burning desire. They know that multifamily is truly a great way to add value to any environment because people need
Build
a home.
wealth.
And if you could build a home, or you can redevelop a property, or you can renovate a property so that it truly provides great world-class environments for people to live in, what a noble thing to do. And the second thing is it produces great returns. And so I think that is definitely why I love multifamily.
Oh, 100%. Multifamily is hands down the best way to build wealth. At Equalex Developments, myself, I love to help other people get started. I do coaching, I do consulting. We also create opportunities for people who want to be completely hands off. So yeah, if anybody wants to reach out on my website, like you mentioned, equaluxdevelopments.com, or on Instagram, Equalux on Instagram, or Equalux Developments on Instagram, or Ali Nazarian on Facebook.
There you go. Well, Ali, it's been definitely a pleasure chatting with you around this. It's
Thank
something
you,
that is
Steve.
truly near and dear to my soul. And I'm glad we were able to cover this. Guys, don't be afraid. There's people out there who are ready to help you, to get you to that front of the line experience so that you don't have to go through the weeds. You don't have to figure it out on your own. There's people who've cut this path before you. Find those people, listen to those people, get to know them through the podcast, get them into your ecosystem, get them on your team, and that's how you build true wealth. Guys, this is the money, this is the mindset, this is the mentoring podcast. We'll see you on the next one.
Cheers, Steve.